Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Witch-King Reviews, and this is Tales of Gore. You're walking down the streets, not of the earth you know, but one seen through the eyes of an alien civilization. For the past 10 years, you have spent your life on the savage and barbaric world of Gore. And yet, due to the dictates of the priest kings and their endless war against the cur, you have sought passage on a discreet vessel, one of the silver ships, heading towards Earth on a voyage of acquisition. Unfortunately, for the past 6 months, you've been stolen away, stuck on this barren, lifeless world you once called home. The colors are drab. Life is dying. The breath of life that you once knew on the Counter-Earth of Gor is dying and dead in a matter of centuries here. But you've found a way home, a way back to Gore. That was the little improvised story I figured I'd do, so let's get into this, shall we? First things first, there is the unfortunate notion for the Tales of Gore role-playing game and the setting at large that it is incredibly racist and sexist, as well as misogynistic and other nasty isms and phobes. Here's the truth of the matter. Well, yes, the naming of two human cultures on Gore as red, savages and hunters, can definitely be seen as racist. I would disagree that they are depicted as anything but people, just ordinary people. I mean, albeit in a pulp Sword and Planet setting, but yeah. Sexism, on the other hand, Gore is no more than a fantasy. There are definitely weird people who you could call Gorean lifestylers who think that everything in Gore, the philosophy of John Norman, should be real and should be the way you live your life. I personally do not give one fuck about that. I like the books. I've read books 1 to 9. I'm currently on book 10, Tribesmen of Gore. But really, if you can get past the blatant BDSM nature of the setting, you get into a very interesting sword and planet, planetary romance, sword and sandal kind of setting where there's no magic, no gods, no psionics, no psychic powers. It's just steel and blood against the priest kings, the cur, and your fellow men and women. Um, so, quite honestly, I do not think that Gore is racist or sexist, um, or even misogynistic. And the depictions of the women in the series are nothing more than the mind of a, quite honestly, not the greatest writer in the world, but at least he writes what his fans want, I guess. Anyways, let's get on to the setting. Tales of Gore takes place in the modern day, but this is a modern day that we do not really hear about because there is a consistent Cold War between two alien species that has raged for thousands of years. On one side, you have the priest kings, insectoid, communistic in the very insectoid sense, aliens that are golden chitinous creatures that resemble giant ants and have access to high technology. Their planet of Gore has been moved countless times throughout the galaxy, or perhaps even beyond it. But one of the interesting things about Gore is that all of the human cultures on it were originally from Earth. Now, no doubt there are aliens, spider people among them, that were also taken to Gore, but within the setting, you have on one hand the priest kings who are fighting for the stable nature of life on Gore and to potentially protect humanity from the depredations of the Cur. And then you have the Cur or Curry, although I'm of one mind to call them Currii just because that's Latin, whatever. Um, the Curry are these giant 8 to 9 feet tall fanged monstrosities with flattened ears against their head and tentacle fingers that have holes in them that can eject uh, claws that can stab and slash at humans or any other animal. They are carnivorous. They do not reproduce the way most species do because they have developed into a biological niche that cannot be readily comprehended, and I would really be remiss in telling you that this setting does not make sense and you just need to lean into it and have fun. So, let's get into the spies that are going in between both sides. You have the agents of the Priest Kings and the agent of the Cur. The agents of the Cur are often women, especially women who are free on Gore or Earth, and they are treated with more respect than Gorean men treat them. But the downside is the Cur find the flesh of human women to be the most delectable and succulent meat they can get their hands on. Because yes, the Cur are carnivorous monsters. The legends of Bigfoot and Yeti and Sasquatch, I honestly believe are, and I think it's mentioned in one of the Tales of Gore adventures, that those legends are actually legends regarding the Cur and their crash landings on Earth and people sighting them. Anyways, Gore itself is a planet that was once hypothesized to exist by the ancient Greeks, known as the Antikython or Octokython. I forget which one. But it's basically a planet that is on the opposite side of our sun in the direct, like it's in the same latitude or whatever the term would be of where Earth is. And so Earth is always out of view of Gore because the sun is blocking it. Gore is a planet with a lower gravity than Earth, with a higher amount of oxygen, which allows for the steel towers to be built so tall and massive. Because yes, even though this setting is very medieval, or even Bronze Age, Iron Age-ish, there are basically skyscrapers, and they're built out of steel. And Gore itself is a very Darwinian, Nietzschean, Ubermensch kind of idea. Like, the strong take from the weak suffer at the feet of the strong, or serve at the feet of the strong, and eventually the strong are overtaken by one who's better than them. Ultimately, Gore is not a place I or many people in the entire world would ever want to live. It is a horrible place. However, I thoroughly enjoyed the books that I have read, and I highly recommend this role-playing game, but let me go into further detail. This setting is very pulpy, especially if you lean into the pulp nature of the setting in your own role-playing games in the game. It has the priest kings who, whenever a human, or any species for that matter, ends up building a gun or any kind of technology that goes against the forbiddances of the priest kings, i.e. anything that isn't medieval, which includes armor, weapons other than spears, swords, knives, daggers, crossbows, bows, vehicles, like most vehicles are totally off limits. People either walk, they ride on Kailaback, or they ride on Tarnback. Tarns are basically these giant eagle bird creatures that have like a wingspan of, I think, like 8 to 10 feet. I'm not entirely sure if it's 8 or 10 feet, but they're massive. And further, this is a world very reminiscent of John Carter of Mars and the Barsoom Chronicles, as well as other classic planetary romance stories, particularly in the first 3 books. The later books don't really deal with that so much, and if we're being totally honest, any female slave taken from Earth would be stronger than the average Korean man. Just how gravity functions on Gore would change them. So in my personal games, I have female slaves from Earth, and any person from Earth being much stronger and tougher than any Korean. But I digress. The books themselves, including this role-playing game of which I am reviewing, talk in great detail about the world of Gore. It is honestly one of the best realized settings that sadly is hampered by the fact of it being written quite terribly in a lot of ways. But if you can get past that, like I have, you find a really cool set of books. And the travelogues that Tarl Cabot writes across several of the books, where he travels to the Barrens, where he meets the Red Savages, where he travels to the Tahari, where he meets the Taharic tribesmen of Tor and other places, where he goes to Torvald's Land and meets the Norse Scandinavian people who got taken to Gore 1,000+ years ago. There's like all of these different cultures, and it's so fascinating to read about them. Like, and the details, oh my god, details. You have the different animals, birds, fish, torture methods, slave training, slave positions for Kajira and Kajiras, different words, different customs, how clapping works, because in the majority of Gore, at least civilized Gore, people beat their right palm against their left shoulder as a sign of applause. Whereas in Torvald's land, they clap their hands together like we usually do in Western civilization. So yes, this setting is very detailed and deep, and if you ever want to get yourself lost in a pulp science fiction fantasy setting, I highly recommend Gore. Now I figured I'd talk about a few of the anecdotes I have from the games I have run of Tales of Gore. Number one, I have to talk about something that happened about 2 or 3 years ago when I first ran it. I had a group that I ran online, and they had a panty samurai, which are the Japanese humans taken to Gore. And this panty samurai ended up slaughtering all of the guards in Halat's camp, including Halat himself, in order to steal the Kajira. Mind you, that's all a spoiler, so I I apologize. I shouldn't have said that. Um, Secondly, in the game I'm currently running of Tales of Gore, of which I've run 2 sessions of, the group consists of a pirate from Port Car, a Earthman from Alaska named Jed of Alaska, who's a tough motherfucker. I'm not joking. He is so fucking awesome. Further, you have the assassin from I forget where I think he comes from Koroba, but I'm not entirely sure. And then we have the free woman who is a slaver, played by one of my friends, Nat, and that the way he's playing her is to a fucking T when it comes to free women on Gore. Arrogant, haughty, self-righteous, so full of themselves. He's doing it perfectly. We just played through the traitress scenario, which is in the core book, and I hope to run many more sessions with them. Now we should get into the discussion of sexual content in this game. Now, one of the issues that some people may have with Tales of Gore is the blatant BDSM aspect to it. However, I'm here to say that there is an appendix at the back of the book on page 161, or 162 rather, that talks about how to role-play the sexual content in the game. And for all of the Americans and other prudish people out there, you don't have to have sexual content in your game. Not even Tales of Gore. You can just ignore it. So really, there is no issue with this game that I can see arising with sexual content, because I know a lot of gamers are not comfortable with sexual content in their games, especially when it comes to player versus NPC or player versus player. Let's see. Now, altogether, for all of the details for the writing, for the various details of the setting, for the tips on how to run the game, for the minor gripes I have with the game, just honestly because it's a minor gripe and it's an indie game, and the fact is, indie games tend to have a little issue. Well, actually, most role-playing games have issues with explaining the rules in a consistent and uh, well-defined manner. So I believe I will give this game a 7 out of 10. It honestly is probably a little higher, so I'll give it a 7.5. If you were at all interested in Tales of Gore or any of the Gorean saga of books, I will be posting links in my description, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day, night, or afternoon. Thank you, and have a great day.